The studio lights beamed down on the set of The View, where the audience buzzed with anticipation as the hosts welcomed their star guests for the day. Whoopi Goldberg kicked things off with her signature warmth, introducing Jane Fonda first, the iconic actress and activist who strode onto the stage in a chic pantsuit, waving gracefully to the cheering crowd. She settled into her seat, ready to discuss her latest environmental campaign and share anecdotes from her storied career. Moments later, the energy shifted as Samuel L. Jackson made his entrance, his commanding presence filling the room instantly. Dressed in a sharp blazer and jeans, he flashed that famous grin, high, feving the hosts before taking his spot next to Jane. The conversation started light, with Joy Behar cracking jokes about Hollywood egos, and everyone laughing along. They touched on recent films, with Samuel promoting his newest action thriller, and Jane reflecting on her fitness empire from the 80s. But as the talk turned to politics, a subtle tension began to brew. Jane passionately advocated for climate action, urging viewers to support green policies and criticizing big oil companies for their greed. Samuel nodded at first, but his expression hardened when she mentioned certain celebrities who stayed silent on issues. He interjected casually, saying he admired her fire, but wondered if actions always matched words. The hosts sensed the spark and tried to steer back to fun topics, like favorite co-stars, but Jane pressed on, defending her lifelong commitment to causes. Samuel chuckled, leaning back in his chair, his deep voice rumbling as he shared a story from his own activism days, hinting that some protests felt more like photo ops than real change. The audience murmured, intrigued by the budding debate, while Whoopi attempted to mediate with humor. Yet, Jane's eyes narrowed, feeling challenged, and she countered by questioning Samuel's roles in violent films, suggesting they glorified aggression over peace. He raised an eyebrow, the room growing quieter, as the exchange simmered, setting the stage for what would become an unforgettable clash. The cameras captured every nuance, from Jane's firm posture to Samuel's relaxed, yet intense demeanor, as the discussion delved deeper into personal philosophies on fame and responsibility. By now, the light banter had evaporated, replaced by pointed remarks that had the co-hosts exchanging glances, wondering how to keep the show on track without losing the raw authenticity that viewers craved. Samuel's responses grew sharper, laced with his trademark wit, while Jane held her ground, her voice steady but rising in volume. The segment stretched longer than planned, the producers in the control room debating whether to cut to commercial, but the live energy was too compelling to interrupt. As the back and forth intensified, Samuel dropped a line about hypocrisy in Hollywood, not naming names, but implying enough to make Jane bristle visibly. She fired back, accusing him of being too cynical, and the audience gasped at the directness. Whoopi jumped in again, suggesting they agree to disagree, but the damage was done. The heated exchange had ignited, promising more fireworks ahead in this unscripted moment of celebrity confrontation. As the debate escalated on the set of The View, Jane Fonda leaned forward, her passion evident in every word as she elaborated on the urgency of environmental reform. She painted vivid pictures of melting ice caps and endangered species, urging Samuel L. Jackson to use his platform more vocally for such causes. Samuel, ever the cool operator, crossed his arms and listened, but his smirk suggested he wasn't fully buying into her fervor. He countered by pointing out that, while protests were great, real change came from behind the scenes work, like funding education in underserved communities, something he claimed to do quietly without fanfare. Jane scoffed lightly, suggesting that silence on big issues was complicity, and referenced her arrests for climate activism as proof of her dedication. The audience applauded her bravery, but Samuel shook his head, his voice booming as he recalled his own brushes with the law during civil rights marches in his youth. The hosts, including Sonny Hostin, tried to interject with questions to diffuse the tension, asking about their shared experiences in the industry. But Jane pivoted back, questioning how Samuel could star in films with excessive violence while preaching about peace. He laughed heartily, the sound echoing through the studio, and retorted that art imitated life, and sometimes you needed a strong message to wake people up. The exchange grew more pointed, with Jane accusing Hollywood men of dominating narratives and sidelining women's voices on important topics. Samuel fired back, saying he'd worked with plenty of strong women and that gender wasn't the issue. Authenticity was. Whoopi attempted to lighten the mood with a quip about both being legends who could teach the world a thing or two. But the crowd was hooked on the drama unfolding live. Whispers rippled through the seats as viewers at home tweeted furiously about the unexpected showdown. Jane's tone sharpened, her activist spirit in full force as she challenged Samuel on his endorsements, implying some were tied to corporations harming the planet. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes gleamed with mischief, ready to unleash a verbal barrage. The co-hosts exchanged nervous laughs, sensing the conversation teetering on the edge of chaos. Samuel then shared an anecdote from a past film set where environmental hypocrisy was rampant, subtly directing it toward activists who flew private jets to rallies. Jane's face flushed, interpreting it as a personal jab, and she demanded clarification. He obliged, his delivery smooth yet cutting, turning the tables by highlighting inconsistencies in public personas. The studio air thickened with anticipation, the live broadcast capturing raw emotions that no script could fabricate. As commercials loomed, the producers held off, knowing this was television gold. Jane pressed on, defending her lifestyle choices as necessary for global impact, but Samuel's responses grew wittier, drawing laughs from the audience that seemed to undermine her points. The heated exchange had fully ignited, transforming a routine talk show segment into a battle of ideologies between two titans of the screen. The atmosphere on The View crackled with intensity as Samuel L. Jackson and Jane Fonda's discussion veered into uncharted territory, their words clashing like swords in a verbal duel. Jane, undeterred, elaborated on her decades of advocacy, citing her work against wars and for women's rights, positioning herself as a beacon of consistent activism. Samuel nodded respectfully at first, acknowledging her contributions, but then pivoted sharply, questioning the effectiveness of celebrity involvement in politics. He argued that stars often diluted messages with their egos, using a metaphor from his Pulp Fiction days about style over substance. The audience tittered nervously, caught between admiration and shock. Jane shot back, her voice rising, accusing him of deflection and reminding everyone of his roles that perpetuated stereotypes. Whoopi Goldberg intervened again, suggesting they focus on common ground like racial justice. But Samuel seized the moment to recount his support for Black Lives Matter, implying Jane's circles were sometimes out of touch with grassroots movements. The co-hosts fidgeted, with Alyssa Farah Griffin trying to redirect to lighter fare. But the momentum was unstoppable. Jane's frustration mounted as she listed her arrests and protests, demanding respect for her sacrifices. Samuel's response was a masterclass in composure, his deep baritone delivering lines that mixed humor with critique, like joking about how some activists treated causes like fashion trends. Laughter erupted from parts of the crowd, emboldening him further. Jane's eyes flashed with indignation, calling out what she saw as misogyny in his tone. But Samuel countered smoothly, saying respect was earned through actions, not accolades. The exchange heated to a boil, with rapid fire retorts flying across the table. Viewers could see the beads of sweat on the hosts' foreheads as they navigated the minefield. Samuel then dropped a bombshell anecdote about a charity event where hypocrisy reigned supreme, alluding to guests preaching austerity while indulging in luxury, a not-so-subtle nod toward Jane's world. She bristled, defending her choices vehemently, but the audience's reactions shifted, some cheering Samuel's candor. The live feed captured close-ups of their faces, Jane's determined glare versus Samuel's amused intensity. As the segment dragged on, the producers whispered urgently, but the raw authenticity kept the cameras rolling. Jane attempted to regain control by pivoting to climate data, but Samuel interrupted with a quip about selective outrage, drawing more laughs and gasps. The tension peaked when Jane directly challenged his integrity, prompting Samuel to lean in, his presence dominating the frame, ready to deliver the knockout blow that would redefine the interview. In the midst of the escalating confrontation on The View, Samuel L. Jackson's demeanor shifted from playful to piercing, his words cutting through the air like a well-honed blade. Jane Fonda, sensing the tide turning, doubled down on her arguments, emphasizing the need for unity in facing global crises and criticizing those who mocked sincere efforts. But Samuel wasn't having it. He unleashed a torrent of pointed observations, starting with a recount of Hollywood's performative activism, where stars like her attended galas in gowns made from unsustainable materials while lecturing on conservation. The audience erupted in a mix of applause and boos, the division palpable. Jane tried to interject, her voice strained, but Samuel's commanding presence drowned her out momentarily as he continued, his voice booming with authority. He joked about her fitness videos from the 80s, saying they were great for burning calories, but not so much for burning bridges in real advocacy. Laughter rippled through the studio, undermining Jane's composure further. Whoopi Goldberg banged her hand on the table lightly, calling for order, but the damage was unfolding live. Samuel then got personal, without naming names, by sharing stories of encounters with self-righteous celebs who preached one thing publicly, but lived another privately. His implications clear and devastating. Jane's face reddened as she accused him of bullying, but he retorted with his signature flair, quoting lines from his films, to emphasize authenticity over appearance. The co-hosts, including Sarah Haynes, attempted to mediate, praising both for their passions, But Samuel pressed on, highlighting inconsistencies in Jane's career choices, like films that glamorized excess. The crowd's reactions grew louder, some chanting Samuel's name, which only fueled his momentum. Jane fired back weakly, trying to reclaim the narrative by discussing her recent book on activism. But Samuel dismissed it with a witty one-liner about books gathering dust, while real work happened on the streets. Gasps filled the room as the humiliation began to set in, Jane's legendary status challenged in real time. The camera zoomed in on her discomfort, capturing a rare vulnerability. Samuel's delivery was relentless yet charismatic, turning the exchange into a spectacle that had everyone on edge. As the segment hurtled toward its climax, the producers finally signaled for a break, but not before Samuel landed another blow, questioning the sincerity of arrests that seemed timed for maximum publicity. Jane sat back, stunned, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. The pinnacle of the heated exchange on The View arrived as Samuel L. Jackson delivered what would become the viral moment of humiliation for Jane Fonda. With the audience hanging on every word, he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers, and unleashed a monologue that dissected her public persona with surgical precision. He started by praising her trailblazing spirit, lulling her into a false sense of security, before flipping the script to expose what he called the Hollywood hustle, activists who use causes as career boosters rather than genuine crusades. The crowd roared with mixed reactions, some in agreement, others in defense of Jane. She attempted a rebuttal, her voice cracking slightly under the pressure, but Samuel overpowered her with anecdotes from mutual acquaintances, hinting at behind the scenes diva behavior that contradicted her saintly image.